have some more complex problems, but the same 5 steps that we were doing in the last lesson. So let's go ahead and look at some of these. We're going to continue with our 5 steps here at the bottom. So our first step, grouping symbols. We do have parentheses in this first one, so let's go ahead and distribute. So we have 6 times 1 and 6 times 3k. 6 times 1 will give us 6, and 6 times 3k will give us 18k. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this whole piece so I don't forget it. So that's step 1. Like terms on the same side. Nothing we can combine on this side, nothing we can combine on this side. So I'm going to go on to step 3. Variables on both sides. So both sides of this equal sign have a k on them. So we're looking for the smaller number, the smaller coefficient in front of the k. So I'm going to go ahead, since 6 would be less than 18, I'm going to go ahead and add 6k to both sides. And remember, we want the k's to go with the k's, so we're lining up that k right here and not adding it here. So we have 18 plus 6, which will give us 24k. Bring down that plus 6. And then we're left with just 18 on this side. All right, so that's step 3. Step 4 is numbers on both sides. So we have a 6 over here with that k. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract that 6 because it's positive. I want to do the opposite. Subtract 6. Which will cancel out, and we're left with 24k on this side. And then 18 minus 6 will leave us with 6 over here. And then our last step is to divide. So we're going to divide by 24. Oops, sorry. 18 minus 6 is not 6. Pardon me, it is 12. So we're going to divide by 24, and we will get k equals 1/2. And you can plug that in your calculator, 12 divided by 24 as well, and it'll give you 1/2 or 0.5. Either one will work. So let's go ahead and look at number 2. So first step, do we have grouping symbols? Yes, we have those parentheses, so let's distribute. -2 times 1 will give us -2. And then -2 times -7n will give us positive 14n. I'm going to bring down this entire piece. So that is number 1. Number 2, combine like terms. Neither side has any like terms to combine. Variables on both sides. So we do have variables on both sides. So we're looking for the smallest coefficient, which would be this 5. So it's positive 5. I'm going to subtract it, do the opposite sign, because 5 minus 5 will give us 0. We're left with just 34 on this side. 14n minus 5n will give us 9n, positive 9n. And then we're just going to bring down that -2. And that's step 3. Step 4, numbers on both sides. So we want to get this 2 over to the other side. Since it's -2, we're going to add it. So that'll give us 36 on this side. That'll cancel, and then we're left with 9n on this side. Last step is we're going to divide. So divide by 9 on both sides, n equals 4. All right, so let's look at some other problems as well. So same thing with these practice problems. Let's go ahead and go through our 5 steps. So in this first step, it's grouping symbols. And in this first problem, we have 2 sets of grouping symbols. So we're going to go ahead and distribute both sets. What that means is we have a -1 here. So let's distribute that one first. So we have -1 times 1 will give us -1. -1 times 7x will give us -7x. And then we'll continue to the next set of grouping symbols. So we have -6 times -7 and -6 times negative 8. So let's go for the first one. Negative 6 times negative 7 will give us negative 42. And then negative 6 times negative 8 will give us positive, or x, sorry, not 8. Negative 6 times negative x will give us positive 6x. So that's step 1. Step 2, like terms. So we look and we see if we can find any like terms. If you look at this side, there is a lot we can combine. We have a positive 1, and we have a negative 42. They're numbers by themselves. They have the same last name. And the same with negative 7x and positive 6x. So again, we're looking for the same last name. Numbers by themselves have the same last name. So negative 1 and negative 42 will give us negative 43. And then negative 7x plus 6x will give us negative 1x. And then we still have that 36 on this side. So that is number 2. Variables on both sides? No, we just have that x on this side. So that is number 3. Step 4 is our numbers on both sides. So we want all the numbers on one side. So this 43, I'm going to add it to move it to the other side. So that'll cancel that out on this side, and I'm left with just 1x, negative 1x. And that will give us 79 on this side. And our last step is to divide. So we're going to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And that'll give me x equals negative 79. So again, these look crazy and look complicated. Same 5 steps. Same 5 steps each and every time. I'm going to erase this just so we have more room for number 4. All right, same 4 steps. Start with grouping symbols. So I'm going to distribute this negative 5 first. So negative 5 times 1 will give me negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5x will give me positive 25x. And then we continue. So we're going to distribute this 5. So 5 times negative 8 will give us negative 40x. Don't forget that x there. And then 5 times negative 2 will give us negative 10. And I'm going to copy this part of the problem as well. So that is number 1. Number 2 is combining like terms. So let's look at each side of the equal sign separately. So we have negative 5 and negative 10, and then positive 25x and negative 40x. So negative 5 and negative 10 will give us negative 15. And then positive 25 and negative 40 will give us negative 15x on this side. And then if you also look over here, we have negative 4x and negative 8x. Those you can combine as well. That will give you negative 12x. They have the same last name, so we can combine them. So that's number 2. Number 3, variables on both sides. Well, we have x's over here and x's over here. So what I'm going to do is, since this negative 12x is completely by itself, I'm going to move this 15x over, because our ultimate goal is to get x's on the same, like by itself on one side of the equals. So since that one's already started to be isolated, let's move it over there. So on this side, we're left with just negative 15. And then on this side, we have 3x. We don't have any numbers by themselves, or numbers on both sides. So we are done with number 4. And then our last step is to divide. So let's divide both sides by 3, which will give us x equals negative 5. So go ahead and try some of these practice problems on your own. right, hope you guys had a chance to do those on your own and you use those same 5 steps every time. So let's go over these together. So in this first one, we do have grouping symbols. You should have distributed that too to give you 8x, and then -6. Then you can just copy the rest of it. So that's number 1. Number 2, like terms, is there anything we can combine? You should have realized that -6 and -8 could go together. So we're left with 8x minus 14 equals 4 plus 2x. All right, number 3, variables on both sides. We do have x's on either side. So you could do it either way. I would have subtracted this 2x over 6x minus 14 equals 4. Step 4 is to look at those numbers on both sides. So let's go ahead. You should have moved this 14 over by adding it. 6x equals 18. The last step is just to divide. So divide both those sides by 6, and you're left with x equals 3. So all of that and x equals 3. And like I mentioned earlier in a previous video, you can add that x or that 3 in for all of the x's in this equation. So we could plug in a 3 here and plug a 3 here and see if it still equals out. So let's go ahead and look at number 2 now. So we start with our grouping symbols. And distribute this. So -8 times 6 will give us -48. And then -8 plus 5 will give us -40n. And then I'm just going to copy this side. And that's number 1. 2 is like terms. You should have recognized there are no like terms to add on the same side of the equal sign. 3 is variables on both sides. There are n's on both sides, so I'm going to subtract this 3n from here and subtract it from both sides. So we're left with -5 equals -48 minus 43n. Numbers on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and add 48 to both sides. That'll give us +43 equals -43n. And then our last step is to divide. Divide both sides by -43. And we should get n equals -1. So try these next 2 practice problems on your own. All right, so with these ones, again, they're a little more complicated, but the same 4 steps. So we start with our grouping symbols. So it's -12x minus 9 plus 24x plus 4 equals 43. I distributed that as well. So that's number 1. Number 2 is combining like terms. So we've got -12x, +24x, and then -9, +4. So we've got 12x minus 5 equals 43. And then we don't have variables on both sides, so that's step 3 is done. Numbers on both sides. We do have numbers on both sides. So I'm going to take that 5 and add it right here. Then our last step is just to divide. Divide by 12 on both sides. So x equals 4. So last problem of this unit. We have step 1, our grouping symbol. So let's distribute that -4. All right, so that is step 1. Step 2, combining like terms. If we look at this, there are no like terms that we can combine in that one. And then we have variables on both sides. We do have variables on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 24a on this side and subtract 24a on this side. We're left with negative 22 equals negative 4, and then this will give us 0. So does negative 22 equal negative 4? No. So this is another one of those no solution problems. Now, if it were to say negative 24 or negative 22 equals negative 22, then, so if it said something like negative 22 equals negative 22, then it would be all solutions, meaning no matter what you plugged in for x, it would be the answer. But that's not what we see here. We see negative 22 equals negative 4, which is not true. So our answer is going to be no solution. And that's it for Unit 9.